Welcome to Difference Talks, the show that focuses on one word, differentiation, and how it is more important today than ever to discover what makes your brand unique and celebrate it with the most important people, your team.
In each episode, we meet people who've had the courage to stand up and stand out, sometimes against great odds. In a world of copies, conformity, and commodities, uniqueness speaks volumes. Difference Talks.
Well, everybody, it's Barry LeBove. I'm the author of The Power of Differentiation and the founder of LeBove Marketing Communications and Training. I have a really unique guest today, and it's all about transformation. Ron Baker, top-selling author, has a background in CPA, big business, small business, and he's going to talk today about something we think is really, really exciting, and that is the direction that our economy is going. By the end of this episode, I think we're going to learn a few things that will help us get an edge, help us differentiate. So, Ron, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Barry. I'm thrilled to be here.
Ron, I've known of you and I have known you for a few decades. Share the highlights with our audience, and then we're going to dive into experience, into transformation, into differentiation for companies of all sizes.
Okay, I'll give you the abridged version. Started my life as a CPA. I'm a recovering CPA. I knew I wanted to be a CPA in high school, so that's one thing that makes me a little bit different.
Yeah, that's sad.
But yeah, very sad. I started my life in a big 8 accounting firm, but when I left that firm, I started my own. And I was studying at that time, this was 1988, I was studying companies that were known as TQS, Total Quality Service. It was kind of the anti-TQM movement. It was more focused on customer service. I was studying outfits like Disney and Nordstrom and FedEx and just companies that had stellar reputations for service. And I said, I want to emulate them. And I told my partner, I said, the way we bill in professional services makes no sense, and it's a crappy customer experience. That's what got me into pricing. And so we started doing it in our firm. There was nobody on the circuit talking about it. There was no books about it. There was no classes you could take. And we made every mistake under the sun, but we stuck with it because the customers loved it. They perceived it to be higher level of experience when you give them certainty in price. And so I got really excited by that. I wrote a book about it. I started teaching it. The book took off around the world, sold 40,000 copies. Kind of interesting because it was a $150 professional book.
Mm-hmm. I have the book.
Do you have the wow?
Yes,
okay.
Yes,
that's out of print. So
Yeah.
My brother kept selling them on eBay for a few $100. But anyway, so that and I sold my interest in my firm to my partner who still runs it. And I started consulting and writing and speaking around the world on pricing. Mostly my goal, my purpose in life was to bury the billable hour and the timesheet across all professional firms, not just accounting, law, advertising, you name it. And now my latest book is Time's Up, which is all about the subscription economy. But even beyond that, I'm very excited about what I see is we are heading into the transformation economy. And this is something that Joe Pine has popularized through his book, The Experience Economy. He's working on a new book that'll be out later this year called The Transformation Economy. And we've already talked to a couple of other authors on this topic on our show. And I'm just seeing more and more examples of companies who, for their primary economic offering, are helping customers become healthier, wealthier, or wiser, or some combination thereof. And that is far different than just selling products and services or even staging experiences. Because now when you transform, when you guide a transformation, which is all you can do as a company is guide it. The customer's got to want to change. They have to be motivated and they have to make sure it sustains through time. But what's really neat about that is when you guide these transformations, the customer's the product. And that is stunning. There is no point higher on the value curve than transforming somebody.
I'd like you to go deep and specific in this. Let's pretend I'm a manufacturer and I'm listening or watching here, and I'm going, okay, you talked about experience, but we're building stuff. We're building, could be rail cars. We're building tank trailers. We're building ambulances. We're building things like that. How does that affect my business? Or are you just talking, Ron, about service companies?
Probably my favorite example from a manufacturer is Fender. Fender, I think, is the largest guitar manufacturer in the world. I'm not sure about that, but they're big. They make a lot of guitars.
They're up there. There's Fender, there's Gibson. I'm a former recovering musician, so I'm very familiar with Fender.
Okay, great. So they interviewed the CEO, and they asked the CEO, what's difficult about selling guitars? And he said, the problem is people, get all excited. They want to learn how to play. Maybe they have, a music teacher lined up. They buy one of my guitars, and he says 95% of them quit within 6 months. Guitar goes under the bed or in the closet. And he said, even worse, a year later, they re-gift it to somebody, a cousin or something, and I lose another sale. And he said, so in 2017, July, Fender launches Fender Play, a digital platform. I think it's got thousands of videos, and to help you play at any level that you aspire to. So I would imagine that'd be beginning, intermediate, advanced, maybe beyond. And 2020 hits, Barry, and COVID, and we're all home, we're locked in, we're learning how to make bread and new languages and all of it. And he comes out and says, look, we're going to make Fender Play available for a trial. I think it was 3 months. He got 1 million subscribers within a week. He shut down his system, basically, and sold a lot of guitars from it, obviously. And as of 2024, Fender Play has 930,000 subscribers paying $149 a year. They have a 5% churn rate. And between 2020 and 2023, they sold more guitars in their history than they ever have. And when he was asked about this, they asked him, what did you learn about Fender Play? He said, what I learned was we are not selling guitars. We are selling musicianship at the level that you aspire to play. And that is a transformation.
Yeah, what's interesting there is the musician, as you well said, it's at the level they desire. So, for instance, that really advanced jazz player would laugh at the level that maybe you or I would be at. And he or she would go, that's ridiculous. But that's not important because you're the customer, I am, and we're transformed. We are now a musician at some level, and we're able to experience this. And like you said, otherwise it was kind of an ornament at home sitting in the corner on its guitar stand being unused. I want to dig a little deeper into this. I'd like you to explain to the audience the difference between, or the connection between, experience and transformation, because Joe Pine had the book, The Experience Economy, and now he's looking at transformation economy. What's the difference? How do they connect? Because my experience with those terms is many times the customer does not distinguish between what your brand is and what the experience they receive is. So if they go to a dealership, you mentioned automotive, they go to a dealership and they get a terrible service experience, they're going, oh, I hate this brand, I'll never buy them again. But quite often it has nothing to do with that product. It was how they felt, how they were served or not served when they were in there, and they walk out. Can you dig deeper into this? Because every single business out there has some level of customer experience that they provide, whether they even know it or not.
Oh, yeah. And a lot of it is mediocrity or poor, I would say. I mean, that's why when you study the great service leaders like a Nordstrom or a Disney, Lexus, they don't brag about their service because they know they fall short, so they're very humble about it. But the greatest thing is, I'll say, and it's a great question because there is definitely a connection between these things. When Joe Pine, in his book, The Experience Economy, published in 1999, laid out the progression of economic value, he started at the undifferentiated lowest pricing point of
Right.
commodities.
Mhm.
And he said, okay, you mine a commodity, flour, wheat, whatever. How do you decommoditize a commodity? Well, maybe you take a few commodities and put them together and make a product, make a good, something tangible. So you take flour, wheat, yeast, other thing, and make bread. Now, of course, we have all different types of bread, like
Sure.
milk, right?
Right.
So that gives you a little bit more pricing power. So you move up to, and commodities would be like, that would be the agricultural economy.
Mhm.
You move
Right.
into goods, now we're in the industrial economy, right? Mass production and all of that. What happens when your good becomes a commodity?
Mhm.
Well, if you can wrap a service around it, so you're General Electric, you build airline engines. Well, let's say you wrap the power by the hour service guarantee around it that says, hey, we're going to do preventative maintenance on this engine, make sure that it keeps running because airlines only make money when they're in the sky.
Right.
And we'll make sure the engine runs. When it goes down, we'll be right out there to fix it, get it back in the air. That's wrapping a service around the product and gets you more pricing power. Well,
Mm.
what happens when your service becomes a commodity?
Right.
Well, now if you can put an experience in there, have it where people will actually pay to spend time with you, like we do when we go to Disney Park, right?
Right.
We pay a week to get into Disney World or whatever, and they stage experiences that are memorable,
Right.
that we'll have photos and happy memories and all of that. But then he asked a very provocative question. He said, what happens when your experience becomes a commodity? Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. I've seen Taylor Swift 3 times or
Right.
Bruce Springsteen 6 times. I'm done.
Right.
He said, well, then the next and highest level on this progression of economic value are transformations. And this is when you guide the customer from where they are to some desired future state. So it's always kind of like a from to, right? From smoker to non-smoker, from overweight to fit or healthy or whatever it might be. Obviously, doctors and all of that are very well poised to do all this, but people are looking to be healthier, wealthier, and wiser.
Mm.
And transformations can help customers achieve their personal aspirations, like the Fender story. The interesting thing about all of this, Barry, is as you move up from commodities to goods to services to experiences to transformations, each of the higher levels subsumes the prior level. So let me give you an example. You're baking a cake in the 1900s. Some mom's baking a cake for Johnny's birthday. She's got all the raw ingredients, right? The egg, and then she's baking it. She's using all the commodities and turning it into a cake. Then the 30s roll around, and we have Betty Crocker and Duncan Hines cake mix. Maybe she busts an egg into it, right?
Right.
So that is obviously a good. Then in the 50s and 60s, we run down to the bakery, and your parents bought you a sheet cake. So the
Right.
baker made it. He did the service, and obviously it was more than would have cost if you did Duncan Hines. But then Chuck E. Cheese comes in the 80s and says, no, throw your birthday party here and we'll give you the cake. The cake's included. That's an experience, right?
Right.
Staging the birthday party. Well, now the transformations are saying any goods or services and experiences related to the transformation are going to be subsumed into the transformation. In other words, you're paying for getting to that desired future state. The great example that Joe Pine gives about this is he's a good golfer. I think he was like a 15 or 12 handicapper. And he was talking to a pro and he said, I want to be a single digit golfer. And the guy says, okay, well, my lessons are $150 a half hour or whatever. And he says, no, I'll give you 10 grand if you make me a single digit golfer.
Mm.
Now, if you think about that, that's going to change the way the relationship between that pro and Joe, it's going to change how they interact. The pro's probably going to be banging on his door at 7 a.m. Hey, get out of bed. We're going to go play 18. I'm going to play with you.
Right.
And actually, Joe found a pro that was willing to do this, and he is a single digit golfer. And he said, look, I'm paying you for the transformation. I'm not paying. I don't care about in fact, if you can do it faster, I'd probably give you 20 grand, right? If you could do
Right.
this within a week. and I'm not saying that that's the way to price this. I'm just saying, using it as an example of the goods and services are a means to an end. The end is that musicianship. Teach me how to play.
You're right. And what's interesting is it's easy to get caught up into the ingredients or the commoditization of what we're doing and saying, wait a minute, we're providing this, somebody else is, we have to lower our price, or we have to give this portion away, or we can't stand up for what we're doing. And what you're saying is there's actually a higher calling than delivering really good customer experience or good service. And that is understanding what the customer really wants, where they want to go. And if you can help them get there, that's the transformation.
That's exactly right. And another great example that I really like is this outfit called Sinsam. They're in the Nordic countries, and they're the largest optical eyewear. They have brick and mortar stores, kind of like a Wardley Parker, you know. But the founders said, we're going to have people subscribe to us. And this is a very mature industry. And as you know, getting glasses or contacts, a pain in the butt, right?
Yeah.
You get a lot of shoe leather, go over here for this, go over here, get fitted, blah, blah, blah. They said, we're going to take the friction out of this. People are going to subscribe. I think it's like 129 euros a month or something. And everybody in the industry, all the experts said, nobody's going to subscribe to eyeglasses and contacts. And they said, well, they will if it's a frictionless experience. If we say to them, hey, you get as many eye exams as you need, and if your prescription changes, we update all your lenses, all taken care of. And they said, but we're not asking people to subscribe to eyeglasses. We're asking them to subscribe to perfect eyesight.
That's brilliant. We'll be back after our break with Ron Baker. This is absolutely fascinating, and we're going to dig a little deeper. So thank you very much, Ron. Brilliant. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Difference Talks podcast. Difference Talks is brought to you by LeBeau Marketing Communications and Training. LeBeau focuses on one word: differentiation.
In fact, we wrote the book on it, called The Power of Differentiation. Our goal is to inspire 1 million people with this message, helping brands win hearts, minds, and market share.
Discover more at LeBeau.com.
All right, everybody, we have Ron Baker. I think it's absolutely fascinating what we're talking about. Ron, share a story, a Porsche story that is pretty impressive.
It is. Porsche, many years ago, I think about 8-9 years ago, started a program. Originally, it was called Porsche Passport. They changed it to Porsche Drive. And the thing here, it's a subscription model. And you pay about $5,000 a month, and you have access to a fleet of Porsche models, I think 7. And you can change out every day. You can call them up and say, hey, I've got friends coming out and they want to go wine tasting, bring me an SUV, come white glove my convertible away. And they'll do it. And then the next day you can call and switch again. And the thing about this is Porsche covers everything except gas and tolls, but they pay for the insurance. There's no maintenance, so no oil changes, no getting the tires rotated. I mean, they've made this really, really frictionless. And people say, well, okay, $5,000 a month. How's that different from buying a Porsche or leasing a Porsche?
Right.
Well, here's the difference. It's not tied to a car. You are subscribing to Porsche. You have a one-to-one relationship. Now, of course, they're monitoring you, where you drive, what your preferences are. They know your music preferences, where you dine out. I mean, I'm sure they're going to monetize that down the road. But the point is, your relationship is not with the car, it's with Porsche. And the interesting statistic from this program so far, and it's expanded, by the way, from the original 2 cities, I think they're up to 15, 80% of the people who subscribe to Porsche Drive are new to the brand.
That's amazing.
And my question is, what do you think they'll be driving for the rest of their lives? Probably a Porsche.
Let's talk about experience versus transformation, differentiation. Let's go into healthcare. What about concierge doctors? That's a growing field. Can you share a little something in that area?
Sure. I can give you the history of it really quick. A guy named Howard Moran, he was the team doctor for the Seattle Sonics NBA team. And he said, when my guys get hurt, I can run out on the court. I know everything about these guys, their medical history, what they're allergic to, what drugs they might be on, whatever. He said, I can get them back in the game instantly. He says, why don't I know the same thing about my panel of patients in my practice? And he said, because I've got too many patients.
Right.
The average GP in the United States has a panel of patients of 2,400 people. And so Howard Moran decides to upend medical delivery and says, no, we're going to start MD Squared, which is the largest concierge practice in the US. And we're going to assign a doctor to a maximum of 50 families. And it's going to be 24 grand a year. And Barry, he did this in 1996. We didn't even have the vocabulary to describe this. I called it retainer-based medicine. There's nothing retainer about it. You're paying for access and insurance that when you need a GP, they're on demand. You can call them, text them. Now, not in 96, but now you know,
absolutely,
you just have, you have access to your health records, all of that. They don't take insurance. It's a one-to-one relationship, so it restores the sacred doctor-patient relationship. There's no middleman insurance company questioning everything the doctor does. Doctors hate that, right? They say insurance companies are practicing medicine without a license, basically. And this thing took off. And of course, all the experts said this will never work, blah, blah, blah. Once that model was proven, direct primary care physicians started sprouting up. Now there's over 2,500 independent DPC practices. They max out at about 600 patients per doctor. We've been interviewing one on our radio show, Dr. Paul Thomas from Plum Health. He's in Detroit, Michigan. So a very low to moderate income, demographic. He's $100 a month. And since the 4 years we've been talking to Dr. Paul, he's now got 3 locations, and I think he's got 7 or 8 doctors. So he fills them up to 550 or 600 patients, and then he'll add another doctor at that point. But they cover anything you need medically that they can do as a GP. Now, they're not going to do knee surgery or cardiac surgery, but they will quarterback those relationships. They'll find you a specialist. They'll go to the appointment with you because they run at 25% capacity of a normal doctor with 2,400 patients, where you have to see 50 or 60 patients a day in that operation. You get 5 minutes with them. This is not why people became doctors. They became doctors to help people. The average DPC meeting with a patient is over an hour. And so they're practicing medicine the way they wanted to when they aspired to be a doctor. And the really fascinating thing about this is they've taken a fee-for-service model of normal doctors who take insurance and Medicare and all of that. And a doctor's only paid when they do something to you. A test, a procedure, an office visit. This is why they don't FaceTime with you or text you, because they're not paid for it. And the concierge doctors are paid when they do something for you. And they're always there for you. So it's not about just, curing you when you present with an illness. It's about keeping you healthy. And that's a completely different paradigm.
One of my dear friends is a world-renowned cardiologist, Dr. Michael Miro, and he said basically the traditional medicine model has been based on tragedy and problems and horror, basically car crashes, serious illnesses, and that's when that model then activates. Instead of it being something that's based on helping you stay healthy, transforming you, as an example. I understand the concept of concierge. My wife and I had a concierge doctor for a number of years who was a former White House doctor for a couple of presidents. And I was shocked because I walked in the very first time. There was nobody in the waiting room.
They don't even have waiting rooms.
No. Well, it was 2 chairs, and I was introduced. I walked in, and they began the whole procedure. There were no patients in there while I was there. That was it. And I couldn't believe it. I was stunned. And I was able to text the doctor if I had a sore throat or I had an infection come back in my ear or whatever it was. And she'd say, oh, do this, dot, 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 there you go. And it was a completely different experience. And her access to the very top doctors, if I wanted to get a special treatment or something, was at the very top. So it was worth that because it was transformational. It was something where your life is completely different. Now, I'm going to throw a curve at you here. In the world of business, and you're working with large and small companies every day, what are the biggest pitfalls that, whether you're a multi-billion-dollar company or you're a smaller one, that you see these companies making that you just wish you could stop them and say, hey, wait a minute, do you realize what you're doing? Here's what you need to be looking at. This is where you need to go.
Wow, that's a great question. I think pricing is still not given enough attention by a lot of companies of all sizes, even big ones. Even though the pricing revolution started in the big companies, they actually created pricing departments. Professional pricers now exist. I think it's a profession. They've moved into the C-suite, but not in still a majority of the companies. So I think there's still a lot more work to be done with companies and their pricing. They don't pay enough attention to it, nor does the board, by the way, especially in public companies. They don't spend hardly any time on pricing. And I think they should, because it's part of strategy and positioning and branding.
Now, when you say pricing, can you go a little deeper on that? Because are you talking about, you're not talking profit, you're talking about how they are pricing. Are you talking about how they are positioned in comparison? What are you talking about, Ron?
Yeah, I'm talking about pricing based on value and not cost plus. You know, cost plus leaves lots of money on the table. Even though it's simple and people understand it, it's a suboptimal pricing strategy. And so to be able to value price means you've got to understand your value from the customer's perspective, because value is completely subjective and it's contextual. So some of the insights, a lot of the insights actually from behavioral economics play into this, but also understanding that value is subjective and the customer's mind can change really, really fast on value. You know, these Ozempic drugs and drugs like them,
Right.
publishers have noticed a 15% drop in self-help books, you know, because, hey, I've lost weight based on these drugs, so I don't need to buy this weight loss book or whatever. So dieting books have taken a big hit. That's because value is subjective. We can change our mind overnight. And companies have to pay attention to what customers value. And I think more and more it's going to be these transformations. It's not going to be the guitar. It's going to be help me play it better.
So if you look 3 years down the road, and let's say you and I are back on the podcast, and I go, okay, Ron, what were the big things that you are so fired up that have happened in the last 3 years in the economy with the best companies, not with everybody, with the best? What's happened? It's 3 years from today.
I think we're going to see more marketing and messaging around transformations. We help you become fitter. We help you do this. We help you with a community of patients that have similar problems as you, that can help you through your difficult time, or anything that can help us be healthier, wealthier, wiser, and purposeful and meaningful as well should be thrown in there.
When you look at yourself and what you offer, because, you know, we focus on differentiation, and this entire podcast is about differentiating the experience, making it transformational. What is your differentiation? How do you look at yourself and say, here's where I am different. Here's where I stand out.
Well, I put a stake in the ground really early in my career by going out and saying that I want to bury the billable hour and timesheet, which is a completely you know, debatable topic. And I always wanted, and Tim Williams taught me this, but I've always wanted to have a purpose that was completely debatable. Because if it's not debatable, it's probably milk toast and it's not going to move anybody. I'm not trying to appeal to everybody. I don't need everybody. I only need that, you know, that 17% to hit the tipping point and get the system to tip. And that's kind of where I think I stick out from other consultants. I'm willing to put a stake in the ground.
I love that. You want a position that's debatable, It makes it more interesting. You stand out. It's memorable. It's got a power to it. And one thing you said is true. You cannot handle all the business in the world. So why try to cater to it with some milquetoast position?
Yeah. And Barry, back to your first question, which was great. Another thing that I see so many companies do, they try and be all things to all people. And that just drives me crazy. It's kind of like, if you were a veterinarian, your sign would say veterinarian taxidermist. That way you could say, either way, you get your cat back. And I just don't think that works.
I think that's great. One final question for you, personal question. You work all day, you get done. You feel more energized at the end of that day than you did when you got up. You're fired up. You're excited about what you have accomplished. What's happened in that day? What is your best day?
Yeah, we call them HSDs, high satisfaction days. And normally they're generated because somebody sent you a gift or something as simple as a handwritten thank you note or an email explaining how your book has impacted their life. Or I get emails from spouses that explain that, hey, my husband or wife read your book and it changed the way she practices law or accounting, advertising, whatever it is. Those are why I do what I do.
You know what is so interesting? We're now in our second season of doing our podcast, and what's fascinating, I'm sharing with you, Ron, but also with our audience, is when we ask leaders what is their best day, it so often revolves around people and making a difference. And a couple of really standout people we've interviewed, Jason Lippert of Lippert Components, as well as Bob Chapman, who's the best-selling author. What was interesting, and I want our audience to hear this because this is fascinating. You just mentioned that you're hearing from, let's say, a spouse, and you're making a difference in the spouse's husband or whatever. That's exactly what I heard when I talked with Jason Lippert and Bob Chapman independently, when Bob said he'd sit down with his employees and he would talk about how are they doing. And his passion, his excitement came out when he heard them talking about how their family life was now better. Jason Lippert sits down with his employees and sets goals with them. His achievement of all achievements is hearing that they are happy with where their personal life is now headed. It's those things. And it's so interesting because you think of the world of business being relatively cold, let's say, and it's not. It's about humans, and it's inspiring to hear that. So I thank you today. I want to wish you, again, tremendous fortune. I'm guaranteeing that people listening and watching will want to know more about you, how to reach out to you, and or how to purchase your book. So can you share that before we sign off?
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm one of the influencers, so I've got a lot of posts on my LinkedIn page about that. I also do a live radio show, The Soul of Enterprise, and they can find that at thesouloфenterprise.com. We've done over 500 shows. We've been on for over 10 years. So there's a lot of content up there. I've interviewed a lot of authors, business authors, economists, and all sorts of just really interesting people, kind of like what you do, Barry. And that's a blast too, by the way. And you can find me on Twitter, or X, I guess, at Ronald Baker. And you can also email me at ron@verasage, that's VERASAGE.com.
I want to thank you today. Everybody, what Ron's talked about is differentiation at an extraordinarily inspirational level, where we're talking about transformation. If you can transform the client, you have definitely differentiated yourself. So I want to thank Ron today. I want to share with our listeners and our viewers that this kind of thinking is inspiring. I hope you do reach out to Ron. Thank you very much. And until next time, I thank all of you.
Thanks, Barry.
Thank you for listening to Difference Talks, produced by the amazing team at LaBeouf. All original music on this podcast was created by LaBeouf.
Buy our book, The Power of Differentiation, on Amazon. Have a question for the Difference Talks team? Email us at differencetalks@labov.com.